What's good? What's good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of The Urban Platform Speaks. Make sure to like and subscribe as you tune into the channel and check out the content. I want to react to a recent episode of the Jason Whitlock podcast, right? When him and what's the guy named Sean? I forgot this guy name, but he was an ex quarterback in the NFL, and they was talking about the Rooney Rule, right? And the fact that I think the amount of black head coaches that there are in the NFL and the lack of coaches that there are in the NFL. And so I thought it was an interesting discussion because they wanted to know if the Rooney Rule, if it's outdated or if it should be done away with. And I'm going to play the audio from Jason Whitlock's show just so I can react to what they have to say about this Rooney Rule.
Tony Dungy was asked about the NFL coaching carousel and no black coaches getting hired. And he had a pretty strong answer. I want to replay that clip for Sean, and then we'll talk about it. Play the clip.
There are some young coaches, talented coaches that have not got the opportunity. Now there's people like Brian Flores and Vance Joseph who have done a tremendous job and have been coaches before, have had coaching experience, have led tremendous defenses, and they didn't get hired this cycle. The question is, why not? And I don't know why not. I'm not going to say it's just because they were black. I know for a fact myself, I was an assistant coach for 15 years, and I got passed over a couple times, came in second on interviews, and a lot of it was not my skin color, but my demeanor, my personality. People didn't think you could win being a head coach the way I coach. That's up to them. I think there's more factors than just race. Is race a factor? I don't know. It might be, but I don't think that's the biggest factor.
All right, so that was Tony Dungy, right? And before they even start this, I just think that sometimes, and they're going to get into it with their discussion. I just think, to me, it just seems like the goalpost is moved. I think most of the coaches that were hired this past season, right, this recently, are, I think, offensive minded coaches. I think 3 defensive coaches was hired, right, and so it just seems like the goalpost is constantly being moved. Like, if you have a whole bunch of coaches, black coaches on the defense, then you'll say, well, now we need offensive minded coaches. Or if you have a bunch of black coaches in the on the offensive end, then you say, well, now we need defensive minded coaches, right? And then Tony Dungy alluded to, like, his demeanor as a coach, right? When it comes to, I think your demeanor really as a coach really shouldn't play into it, right? Because we don't talk about demeanor when it comes to white coaches. Like, take for instance, you got Andy Reid. Like, his demeanor and his coaching style is different from the coaching style that the guy in Mike Vrabel, right? Vrabel in what's with and with the Patriots, right? So as long as you have the opportunity to be successful as a coach, I don't know. I just think all those are distractions. Like, there's always going to be a reason, in my opinion, for why, we need offensive coaches or we need defensive coaches. It's always going to be a reason or moving out of goalposts. John Harbaugh just went to the Giants. He wasn't an offensive coach or a defensive coach. He was a special teams coach, right? And so I just think they moved the goalpost. But let's get now into what Jason Whitlock, and I think his name is Sean King, has to say.
Reaction to what Dungy said.
A lot of truth in what he said. For context, I think if Tony Dungy wasn't Tony Dungy, but you fast forwarded him as an assistant coach in this league to right now, with his personality, his demeanor, but without the resume. If Tony Dungy was in this hiring cycle, would he have gotten hired?
Yes.
I don't know.
Yes.
He even said he was passed over, Jason, because there were owners that didn't think his coaching style would lead to success. So I'm just saying that to say I agree with what Coach Dungy said. I'm going to expound on why I feel like more black coaches weren't hired in this cycle.
Hold for 1 second, though, before you. I want to. Don't lose that point. We got plenty of time. Tony Dungy redefined for NFL owners during his career, like, oh man, you can be a hardcore Christian, not cursing out players. You don't have to be Bill Parcells to have success as a head coach. And I think that is actually now in style, that these player-friendly coaches basically, and particularly, let's say you're DeMeco Ryan, who I think might be the closest thing we have to Tony Dungy. The Houston Texans identified him. They know him well. They love him. He's led 3 straight winning seasons. Clint Kubiak just got the job or is getting the job in the Raiders. First thing he starts talking about is Jesus Christ, and he gave everybody on the team a Bible. Everybody's leaning into the Christian Tony Dungy style because that seems to be the only thing that really authentically connects with these players. They got so much money. If you're not making a faith-based appeal, you have a harder time reaching them unless you have some unique offensive or defensive strategy. But I actually think I think NFL owners are looking for Tony Dungy's, and what Tony Dungy is saying is like, man, when I was coming up, my soft-spoken Christian demeanor worked against me. And what he's really saying, and he's too polite to say, is like this secular, rebellious, I'm a victim, the white man is bad and hasn't given me a shot. That demeanor is off-putting to NFL owners, and that's why you can't be Brian Flores and like, hey, I might sue you if I don't like you or if you don't treat me the way that I think I would. People don't want that.
I look at that prism.
All right, so let me address that right. The Brian Flores situation, I think the reason why he sued is because the team tried to throw him under the bus and make him the face of what is it, like tanking and stuff like that, so the team was tanking so they could get a certain player in the draft, and then he was going to be thrown under the bus, right? And so he didn't want that, you know. But I don't see like when he was coaching, when Tony Dungy was coaching, you had Lovie Smith, who was a coach. What was the guy who coached the Vikings? He passed away. His name Dennis. What was that coach? Right, Dennis. I forgot the coach for the Minnesota Vikings, the black guy. But he was a good coach, and he was more so of a in your face type coach, whereas though Tony Dungy was a coach that was more laid back. And Tony Dungy also made it so like he was telling players or other coaches that you got a family, work a certain amount of hours, go home, get rest, and recharge. Don't be working 16-hour days and putting your family at risk, for this job. And he wound up winning a Super Bowl with that strategy, right? Or with that mindset. So, like I said, you have coaches with different coaching styles. Andy Reid and Mike Vrabel, they just two different kind of coaches, Now, Mike Vrabel is his team is, going to the Super Bowl today. And Andy Reid, he's sitting on a couple Super Bowls. So, like I said, you'll have different guys with different styles. So the coaching style and the demeanor of these guys really shouldn't come into play as far as like holding these guys out of getting jobs.
Or through a different prism when I'm reacting to what Tony said. I wasn't honing in on the faith component. I was talking about the demeanor. I think in today's sports environment, it's so much about entertainment. It's not even content, it's presentation. And Tony's content is always going to be Super Bowl championship caliber, but his presentation isn't always for everyone, especially in 2026. You hear people talk about winning the press conference and, rah-rah this and rah-rah that. Tony was none of that. But what he was he was simplified, but he was very strategic. And there was a consistency to his messaging that either you adapted to and you followed, or you got replaced. I just don't know how that would go off in 2026. And I think a lot of owners might make a mistake and take a guy that's maybe more flamboyant, more get the crowd to clap and cheer in their presentation.
Andy Reid is flamboyant?
Nah, but Andy Reid been in the game a long time, Jason. He's not a new.
See, I think the point that they're arguing is that it's just missing everything, right? It's more so of a distraction because you have coaches with different with different coaching style. Andy Reid, like he said, Andy Reid been in the game for a long time, but there are other coaches who just have a different approach, and different approaches work with different players. So, Andy Reid can relate to certain players, a certain way. The guy, that's in Vrabel, he reached kids in a different way. Then you had the coach in Detroit, all of these guys just have different personalities. So that should not even be the focus. Like everybody, because it's not about like what your religion is or what your beliefs and stuff like that. It's about, can you be effective as a coach and as a leader?
Come by night guy. And so let me get to what I think the issue is. There were 10 available jobs, right?
Yeah.
Let's make it 9. Because John Harbaugh was kind of an outlier. He was the one guy in the cycle when Mike Tomlin decided he wasn't going to coach that kind of supersedes race. Like his resume is his resume. So let's say there are 9 jobs open. 6 of those jobs were given to offensive-minded candidates. The deficiency in the pipeline in the National Football League is not at the head coach position. It's at the offensive line and quarterback coach position, because those are generally the 2 platforms that lead to offensive coordinator. Currently, there are 0 Black offensive coordinators in the National Football League, outside of Eric Bieniemy, who just got hired back to Kansas City. But we all know for the most part, Andy Reid still calls the plays the majority of the time. That's where the deficiency is, because only 3 of those jobs went to defensive guys. Jesse Minter to Baltimore, Jeff Hadley to the Dolphins, and Robert Saleh to the Titans. Now, if you ask me, is Anthony Weaver or Brian Flores or Elvira or even a young guy, Christian Parker, probably as capable as those 3 guys? Yes. But that's an individual decision that was made in those 3 organizations. The bigger picture is the 6 other guys were all offensive coordinator, offensive guys. And so that's why I feel like the NFL has to do a better job. More Black quarterback coaches, more Black O-line coaches that are being groomed to become one of none right now as the actual offensive play caller in the National Football League.
Is that really the NFL's responsibility?
Well, if you're serious about the Rooney Rule, if you're serious about minority advancement and development.
Got you, but that's an arbitrary thing that people have prioritized. They're not doing that. There's no Rooney Rule for white cornerbacks. There's no other position in football where it's like, hey, man, we better get some diversity in here. So that's a burden the NFL is taking on. To me, does
that not strike you as odd, though, that there are 0 Black offensive coordinators? And I know Bieniemy has a title now, but out of 32 organizations in the world, there are 0 current Black OCs.
Let's go.
Let me address what Jason Whitlock said about like the white guys who, you got white people and opportunities as far as like with white people, right? That's just like saying like affirmative action. Like the reason affirmative action was put into places so you could have some diversity there. That was like the main thought about affirmative action. So you could bring in qualified minorities to fill in, to give diversity to the workplace, right? So if the majority is already white, you don't need diversity, for white people. Like, so his argument, in my opinion, don't make any sense.
Let's go. There's 1.5 because Mike McDaniel, daddy is Black, and I know he doesn't.
Did Mike McDaniel say he's not black?
His daddy's black.
But didn't he say he's not black? Didn't he say that when he got to Miami?
No, what he did was he kept it real. That like, my dad is black, but
So
everywhere I've been, I've been treated as a white person. I presented myself as a white person because that's how I look.
Dave Chappelle did a skit where he was a black KKK guy when he was blind. So sometimes you're in denial about what you really are.
No. No. See, let me explain something to you, Sean. Let me give you a little historical perspective.
Okay.
You know who came up with the one drop rule that you seem to adhere to?
Okay.
Racist white people.
What's the one drop rule?
White people, yeah. If you got one drop of black DNA, you're black. And so we have, as black people, allowed the KKK from back in the 1800s come up with, hey, man, if you got one drop of black, you're black. We've let them set the terms and define what people are. And if Mike McDaniel wants to reject that, hats off to him. He doesn't have to be as silly as the rest of us. That dude's half black, half white. Sage Steele's half black, half white. And they should, I don't like the word pride, but it's the only one I can think of off the top of my head. They should proudly lean into their dual racial ethnicity, and they should.
Personally, I mean, all right, I see what Jason Whitlock is saying, but I just think that if you, like I said, you have coaches coming up through the pipeline. If you got, and most of the black guys are on the defensive side of the ball, which, you know, like I said, I just think that you have so many black people playing in the NFL. And so when they say that, you know, we can't find any guys on the offensive end to coach, you know, we looking for offensive coach, but y'all not, you know, y'all not producing no guys on the offensive end. I just think they just moved the goalposts. A few years ago, it was the same, you know, try to make the same argument. Now they're trying to make the argument that, you know, your demeanor is, you know, you gotta be like Tony Dungy. You know, when, like I said, you know, I just think that they continuously move the goalposts, and I don't know. Did the Rooney rule? I want to, you know, leave a comment. Let me know. Do you think the Rooney rule, did the Rooney rule really help? It helped the Pittsburgh Steelers. You know, I mean, they hired Mike Tomlin. He was there for like, I think 19 or 20 years. So, you know, the Steelers did, you know, abide by the Rooney rule for a long time. I mean, you know, they didn't really have to because they just hired a black coach. But let me know, do you think the Rooney rule was successful with the coaches around the league? And so that's my take on it. Make sure to like, subscribe to the channel. Also, don't forget to leave a comment. And with that being said, I'll check you all out in the next video. Peace.